Welcome and thank you for clicking on our video. In this edition, we will be looking at how Toto Wolff and Mercedes-AMG F1 have responded to Sir Lewis's scintillating and historic Silverstone drive, going into the Hungarian Grand Prix. In our previous video, we provided the backdrop to this weekend's Hungarian Grand Prix, because we expected Toto and Mercedes F1 to try and take the shine off Sir Lewis's historic victory at the preceding Grand Prix at Silverstone. We set out the various options available to Toto and Mercedes, and sadly they have shown their hands yet again, as expected. But before going further, we invite those of you who haven't yet done so, to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the notification icon, to be notified when the next video is uploaded. To begin with, we expected that Mercedes would have tweaked the new upgrades that they had brought to Hungary, in George's favour, and it would appear that this was what they did, which ended up being their undoing. George was suspiciously faster than Sir Lewis throughout all the practice sessions. In the first and third sessions there were some 5 cars between Sir Lewis and his flying teammate. It was only in the second session that the margin came down to 1 car. So, it is possible to see why George was so overly confident that he had something in hand against Sir Lewis, that he ended up holding back during the first runs in Q1, where Sir Lewis had topped the sheets during the early runs. Perhaps, if Mercedes hadn't been so focused on using Sir Lewis as a stalking horse, and confident that they had something over him, then George would have run his own race, and put in his own early fast times, as a matter of practice. Of course, the rest, as they say, is history. Checo's crash and the changing weather conditions threw a spanner into their plot, as George was sensationally caught out, and didn't make it out of Q1, while Sir Lewis ended up 5th on the grid. Now, having made such a catastrophic mess of George's qualifying, you would have thought that Toto would have seen Sir Lewis's 5th position as a silver lining in the dark clouds of Hungary, but then you would be wrong. As we pointed out in our previous video, anytime Sir Lewis finishes ahead of George, Toto is quick to find collective fault with Mercedes's performance. For example, when Sir Lewis qualified ahead of George in Spain, Toto was disappointed, supposedly on the grounds that they expected more in performance from the upgrades they had brought to the track. Now, in Hungary, he played that old tune again. Of course, they had the right to be disappointed at George's Q1 exit, but under the circumstances, they should have been relieved like Sir Lewis was with his 5th position. But Toto, preoccupied with boosting George and sabotaging Sir Lewis, ruled that the session was a total underperformance from literally everybody at Mercedes, when that could not be said of Sir Lewis, but never mind. This negative attitude towards Sir Lewis is a matter of public record, and in this vein, Toto and Mercedes had long telegraphed their intent to take the shine off Silverstone, as we showed in our previous video. Antics such as messing with how the Silverstone weekend was recorded on their homepage, and Toto's absence or distance from images commemorating the victory are just some of the examples. Other more recent examples can be found in the run-up to Hungary, as Toto passed the baton for beating Sir Lewis to Andrew Shovlin, the Mercedes trackside engineering director. During his hectic schedule of preparing for the weekend's race, Andrew found the time to grant an interview, in which he was heavily critical of Sir Lewis, who in his opinion was struggling with this generation of F1 cars because they did not suit his style. Of course, during this scathing criticism of Sir Lewis, he was careful to mention how impressive George was. So, in an attempt to boost Sir Lewis's morale on the Friday of the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend, and in the wake of his record-breaking feats at Silverstone, Andrew blamed his outdated driving style for Sir Lewis's failure to extract better performance from the tractor that he as engineering director was responsible for maintaining at the track. This of course is the same Andrew who routinely locked horns with Sir Lewis over the pursuit of performance for the tractor that Mercedes produced post-2021. It was highly commendable for Andrew to give this morale-boosting interview about Sir Lewis, subsequent to the anonymous email about high-ranking Mercedes personnel attempting to mess with his mental health, and Sir Lewis's own admission post-Silverstone that he had doubted himself. Good one, Andrew. 3 cheers for Toto's gopher. While this great trackside engineer, not, with his extensive driving experience, was overflowing with public criticism of the greatest driver of all time, on the eve of the Grand Prix weekend, he had nothing but praise for his teammate, whose performance was not strong enough to prevent their boss's naked pursuit of Max Verstappen. It is therefore easy to understand why Mercedes would be loath to take any solace from Sir Lewis's 5th position under the circumstances. But to truly appreciate how dark the Mercedes mindset is towards Sir Lewis, one just has to look across at the Red Bull garage, to hear their favorite spokesperson, Martin Brundle, waxing lyrical about how he had observed a disturbing loss of confidence from the man who only 6 days earlier had extended several of his records as the most successful driver in F1. All this negativity, from the British media and Mercedes-Benz, days after Sir Lewis's epic Silverstone victory, and in the middle of the Hungarian Grand Prix weekend, compares starkly to how Britain's most successful sportsperson was being treated in Italy. Instead of all the darkness oozing out of Britain, about loss of confidence, outdated driving style, etc., etc., Sky Sports F1 Italy produced a poster celebrating the legend of Sir Lewis, in the wake of Silverstone to promote their coverage of Hungary. Now how about that? Italy looks at Sir Lewis and sees a growing legend, while Mercedes and Britain see an outdated driver lacking in confidence. How is it that Mercedes trackside engineering director Andrew can take the time to heavily criticize the driver whose growing legend Sky Italy is using to sell Hungary? Of course, starting 12 places behind, Mercedes would have to go some to get George ahead of Sir Lewis. If they do not succeed, then the driver that they have been waxing lyrical about will be overtaken by his teammate that they have been publicly criticizing. So, let us see if Mercedes are able to arrange something. After all, they were able to coordinate their criticism with Martin Brundle, such that Andrews could come out on Friday, while Martin's came out on Saturday. George, who ended up 17th, has expressed the team's disappointment given that they were in the hunt for 3rd place on the grid. And under these circumstances, 5th place in a car that loses performance in the heat was no compensation for a qualifying session that ended on a track that heated up quickly enough to dump George out in Q1. Let us see what the race will produce given that dry and cloudy conditions are expected, with a low chance of rain and low winds, and the temperature is expected to be 29 degrees Celsius for the start.